Thank you for joining us on this historic day in Calexico. I'm Anthony Wells. All eyes are on the desert Southwest this morning as we await the arrival of President Donald Trump, the first visit to Calexico in his presidency. He's visiting the exact border he's threatening to shut down. So to continue our live coverage of his visit, News 11's Blake Keller is live at the tarmac from Naval Air Facility in El Centro with the latest. Blake.
Anthony, you're absolutely right about one thing today is the fact that the eyes of the American people, border officials, Washington, even Mexico, their eyes are on this trip, President's trip to Calexico. It's the first in his presidency to this section of the border and his fifth visit to the southern border since he took office. Now, on the agenda today, the president will participate in a round-table discussion with law enforcement officials, and after he wraps that up, he will then head over to a tour of the southern border that he was threatening to close earlier this week. Now, that is a tour of the completed section of the wall, the actual physical embodiment of his immigration agenda. Now, that section of the barrier replaced one that was made from materials taken from the Vietnam War. Now, you are watching a live look right now at Air Force One. Wheels are down here in Calexico. We are just waiting for the president to make his way to a full stop before he gets off to that aircraft. Now, this replacement wall that he is visiting today is 30 feet tall and something that you can see through. It's one of the first major replacement projects of its kind to be completed during Trump's time in the White House. Here it is, everyone. You are watching a live look at Air Force One. On that plane, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. He is here in midst of supporters, protesters. We have lots of media here, so a whole full house in Calexico. So you can see right there, Air Force One touching down. It's way bigger in person than you can ever expect it to be. If you are out here today, you know it is a big deal. Now, it was just one day ago that Trump sang a different tune regarding his position on the southern border. All week now, he has been threatening to shut down the border, but even some of the president's closest allies, like Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, says shutting down the border would be catastrophic to our economy. So he's turning around right now here on the tarmac at Naval Air Facility El Centro. So I wanted to see if you could take a live look right now. He is pulling up quick right here in Air Force One. It is a big deal here. His first trip to the southern border in Calexico since he took office a few years ago. And it is his fifth visit to the southern border since he took office a few years ago. I'm just going to let you enjoy this arrival of the President of the United States for the time being. All right, everyone, just to give you a little bit of a background, in Arizona, our governor spoke out about the border crisis. Initially, Governor Doug Ducey said closing down the border would affect our relationship with Mexico. In fact, Arizona's trade with Mexico totaled nearly $17 billion just last year. But after meeting with the president earlier this week, Governor Ducey said he'd be supportive of a border shutdown as long as it was as short as possible. Now, the president says that he wants to give Mexico a one-year warning to stop the flow of drugs. And if they don't, he's threatened to impose Mexican auto tariffs. Now you can see, I want to give you a look down here right in front of the staircase. We have Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, and she was in Yuma yesterday on Thursday. She is going to join the president on his tour today. Now, during her visit on Thursday, Nielsen said what's happening at the border right now is a security crisis that requires an emergency response. Both Nielsen and the president are calling on Congress to tackle this issue, and they're asking Congress to fix any legal loopholes And even before the president left for Calexico this morning, he had told reporters that lawmakers should, quote, get rid of the whole asylum system. All right, we have the staircase rolling up to Air Force One right now. That's where the president is expected to get off his aircraft. Now, back to his comment he made this morning about getting rid of the whole asylum system. Those who do request asylum, they say they're fleeing their countries because they're facing violence, extortion, hunger, and poverty back home. So today it'll definitely be interesting to see what the president has to say when he sees the border firsthand. Plus, we will have team coverage of planned protests and supporters who are out in the community today in full force. Now, I don't want to get in your way because I do want you to enjoy this view of Air Force One. It's not every day that you get a chance to see this in your own backyard. Now, back to the migration problem. We looked at numbers from U.S. Customs that shows total southern border apprehensions have increased in the El Centro sector by nearly 400% from February last year to this year, while Yuma saw a 230% increase in the same time period. Now, I do want to tell you that the door on Air Force One just opened. Of course, they have to set up the staircase just to make sure everything is set up correctly for the President of the United States. Now, if those of you who were with us 2 years ago remember, in August 2017, President Donald Trump made his visit to the Yuma area. And just 2 years later, he is now visiting the border section in Calexico. So, like we mentioned, that border wall in Calexico was replaced by it's a new one. Basically, it was completed in last year in October. That replacement wall is 30 feet tall. And of course, it is transparent. You can see right through it. It is one of the first major replacement projects of its kind to be completed during Trump's time in the White House. So right now we have Secret Service pulling up. Of course, Highway Patrol is here as well. We do have supporters, also CBP officials, Border Patrol officials waiting on the tarmac for the president's arrival. So if you are tuning in with us, we appreciate it so much. Of course, we will have live coverage all throughout the day on both our live stream and on our KY May early edition. Now, I do want to tell you before the president does make his way out of the aircraft that all week he has been threatening to shut down the southern border, the very border he is visiting today. But even some of his closest allies, like Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, says shutting down the border would be catastrophic to our economy. Now the president is switching his stance on closing down the border. He will give Mexico a 1-year warning to stop the flow of drugs and migrants. If they don't, he's threatened to impose tariffs on Mexican autos. So we are just counting down the moments until we see the President of the United States get off Air Force One, where he will then head to an immigration roundtable discussion with law enforcement officials. Of course, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen will be joining him. This, of course, comes after her visit to Yuma yesterday. Now, we have seen, of course, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection statistics, that the El Centro sector has seen an increase of nearly 400% of migrants coming through the border and being apprehended. In the Yuma sector, they're seeing about a 230% increase. Everyone, there he is, the President of the United States. So right now he is being greeted by cheers from his supporters. They are off to our left right here. He is making his way down the staircase onto the tarmac where he will get into his motorcade. Of course, like we mentioned, he will then head over to a roundtable with law enforcement officials. There he is greeting Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen as well as other officials. His first visit of his presidency in Calexico. He will visit that newly replaced border barrier. It is 30 feet tall. Of course, the one that was replaced had materials made from the Vietnam War. So it's definitely a big part of his presidency is the immigration. So we are hearing more cheers. You can see he's making his way over right now to his supporters. If you are joining us right now, the President of the United States has touched down in Calexico. Right now he is walking over to meet some of his supporters that are waiting patiently for him. You can see he's right there to a crowd of cheers. Now, I wanted to tell you, before he left Washington, D.C. today, he had told reporters there that he is asking lawmakers to, quote, get rid of the whole asylum system. Both Nielsen and President Trump are calling on Congress to tackle the issue of increased migration apprehensions at the southern border. They're asking Congress to fix those legal loopholes. Even before the president left for Calexico, he is saying get rid of the system. Now, those who do request asylum, they say they are fleeing their countries because they're facing violence, extortion, hunger, and poverty back home. So he is just taking a few minutes right now meeting some of his supporters. We see members of the military, of course, Customs and Border Protection officers are here. We have Border Patrol agents as well, all here to see the President of the United States. His motorcade is waiting for him as he gets ready to head off to an immigration roundtable with law enforcement officials. Like we mentioned, that is on his agenda for today. He will then tour the completed section of the border wall in Calexico. Of course, it also has his plaque on it as well. It will be interesting to see what he has to say when he does see the border firsthand. But for the very latest, we will have team coverage on those planned protests, supporters, and his border tour. So stay connected with us all day. Head to our website at kyma.com or download the KYMA News 11 app right now. Of course, if you are joining us on our live stream online, we appreciate you so much. Thanks so much for joining us. You are watching a live look at the President of the United States greeting his supporters in Calexico at Naval Air Facility El Centro. Such a historic day here in this border town. And we do have to remind everyone that all week the president has been threatening to shut down the southern border. And he did change his tune a little bit ago, a few days ago, regarding his position on the border all week, threatening to shut it down. But even some of the president's closest allies, like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, says shutting down the border would be catastrophic to our economy. Like I mentioned earlier, just trading with Mexico in Arizona totaled nearly $17 billion just last year. So definitely a big deal here in Calexico today for the president's visit. Lots to talk about regarding the southern border. It is one of his major components of his presidency is that the border talk. So you can see he is still greeting some of his supporters there. Lots of phones out, trying to get a picture with the president, with the motorcade waiting for him to wrap up so they can head over to that round table with law enforcement officials. Now, I do wanted to touch base on the trade with Mexico. Of course, with Arizona, our own governor spoke out about the border crisis. And initially, Governor Doug Ducey said closing down the border would affect our relationship with Mexico. But Governor Ducey spoke with the president in Washington earlier this week And after their meeting, which he called positive, Governor Ducey said he'd be supportive of that border shutdown as long as it was short as possible. Of course, the president says he will give Mexico a 1-year warning to stop the flow of both drugs and migrants at the southern border. And if they don't, he will impose auto tariffs on the country. Now, we have seen all week the possible complications that could come with a border shutdown. Like we have been reporting to you on KYMA, avocado prices could jump. You know, the U.S. relies on a lot of auto parts from Mexico as well. That would also be affected. So lots at stake when he was threatening to shut down the border. But of course, he has changed his stance on that particular topic. And now he says a 1-year warning for Mexico. Now, as of right now, Mexico has not responded to any of President Trump's comments regarding the southern border. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say today, and we will see if Mexico at all, their government officials, have to respond in any way. So, of course, you can see right there, we're trying to get a look as well. I can see him right there where he is still greeting his supporters. Of course, they're out in full force today. We will have team coverage of both supporters out in Calexico as well as protesters. Of course, you can also keep track with that on our website at kyma.com, as well as our social media. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Now, just to bring it back locally about the border crisis, Trump says there's the flow of migrants into border communities that is becoming an issue. There he is wrapping up with his supporters right there. He's heading to his motorcade. There he is saying hi to everyone who is on the tarmac here supporting the president. His first visit to Calexico today. So definitely a historic day here in the desert Southwest. No matter if you support or oppose his policies, the President of the United States making a trip to your hometown is a big deal. So we're definitely making history here in the city of Calexico. All right, there the president is off. He's in his motorcade, where he is expected to take part in that roundtable with law enforcement officials. So definitely exciting day here. Now, I do want to tell you that we do have team coverage today, so be sure to stick with us on all of our platforms. You can see just the row of Secret Service following the president as he makes his way to that roundtable discussion, and then eventually he will tour the completed section of his border barrier here in Calexico. As we mentioned earlier, if you are now just joining us, that wall is, that fence, I should say, is 30 feet tall. It's transparent. It's something that you can see through, and it's one of the first major replacement projects of its kind to be completed during Trump's time during the White House. So the section of this barrier was replaced in October of last year after it was approved in February 2018. And it was the old barrier that was replaced was made from materials from the Vietnam War. All right, so the president is heading out right now, like we mentioned, to that immigration roundtable and eventually the tour. We do have our reporter on it as well. So after his border tour, the president will depart from Calexico and make his way to Los Angeles. Catch full team coverage tonight, starting with the early edition. Reporting at Naval Air Facility El Centro, Blake Keller, News 11.
Yeah, you just got a live look right now of President Donald Trump exiting Air Force One, greeting his supporters. You saw him stepping into his motorcade. He is now heading to Calexico right now. So let's give you a quick look at what's going on in Calexico, as well as Mexicali. Residents there, along with other people that have traveled from other parts of the country, are there to protest the president and his visit to the valley. We have several reporters at the site of the demonstration in Calexico, where they say around 100 people are in attendance. And meanwhile, expect the president's visit to cause some traffic delays in Calexico, as well as the ports of entry there. We also have a reporter in Mexicali right now to cover everything that's going on across the border as well. All right, that'll do it for us here on News 11. Make sure to download the KYMA News 11 app for the latest updates and alerts on the president's visit. We'll have also up-to-the-minute coverage on KYMA.com. We'll see you again coming up on News 11's early edition at 5 p.m. And we now bring you back to your regularly scheduled programming.